higher self and God realization process. The self and God realization process cannot begin in any individual until they are able to understand, truly understand, that there is nothing that exists that is not God anywhere. And that you too are made of the same stuff that God is made out of. And so is everyone else. Until this is radically understood to the point that you become governed by that in your interactions with everything else in the universe. So until that transition is accomplished, then your quest for self and God realization simply remains at the level of fantasy. You must simply become capable of seeing things the way things really are. In the Yoruba wisdom tradition, there is an old proverb that says, Ta bujet be olumni. If it is God. Case closed. Now this is what must be understood. It doesn't matter how much other peripheral metaphysics you are acquainted with. It does not matter how much history you know. If you do not know this, then there is no possibility for you to recover the recognition of your own inherent divinity. And that's what the path is about. It's not about anything else. It is not purposed to make your life hunky-dory, to make things go more smoothly for you in the world. It is not purposed to help you fulfill yourself in the world. Its purpose is to liberate you from the world and set you free. And until you are able to recover recognition of your own inherent and dormant divinity, then you will always be looking for God in self in all the wrong places. You are bound to become frustrated in such a search. How can you find that which is already inside you looking outside yourself? The search is flawed from the very beginning. So this is what is to be understood. So if you would like to say something about it, you're most welcome. Yes, beloved. D-I-K-S-A. Dista. Dista is a Sanskrit word. It means initiation, literally. But you see, beloved, initiation consists of stages. Mm-hmm. So they are generally two stages of one's initiation. In the African Indian tradition, the first stage has been referred to as the Samai-Diska. This is the initiation that is purposed toward purification. You see, beloved, very often when we find out about spiritual paths, naturally, if there is any genuine thirst in us, we seek initiation into some kind of spiritual system. But usually without quite understanding that before you can make progress on any path, you simply must undergo a process of purification. So there is a initiation stage into the purification process itself to simply prepare you. Very often, and depending upon which tradition, it will involve your dealing with yourself at the level of the body, at the level of the emotions, and at the level of the mind. There's a kind of cleansing that is required in terms of disciplining of diet, disciplining of one's sexuality, moral behavior, so forth, and so on. All of that is designed to begin the process of purification. In that initial stage of one's initiation, one is also given Dhamma, teachings, insights, revelations, instructions, the purpose of which, beloved, is to cleanse the mind of its ignorance, of its own divine nature. That is, again, the whole purpose of sadhana and initiation. It is to embark into a process by which you are able to cleanse your mind of all your ignorance and wrong understanding of who you are. And in that process of purification, when it becomes complete, then the illumination, the enlightenment can occur, i.e., the recognition of your own inherent divinity. So initiation is purposed toward that end. Now, once this purification has matured, then the next level of initiation is offered, which consists of the methodologies, so forth and so on. Now, of course, in ancient time, they were much more rigorous about following that procedure in that exact order. So very often, a spiritual aspirant seeking to become initiated will have to spend years, years, 10, 20 years or so will become necessary for many just to go through that process of the removal of their own inherent ignorance, of their inherent and divine nature. What the mystics are aiming at, beloved, is not simply an intellectual proposition about it. They actually are aiming to lead you to the heartfelt experience of your own inherent divinity. And that looks very different from the intellectual proposition. So once this process has become mature in you, beloved, then the next level of initiation, Sadhaki-Ji, is given, which paves the way now for the full recovery of the self-experience as being God. You must understand the self-experience of being pure consciousness in the individuated form is different from the experience of being God. Now, I have talked much about that in the book of Sadhana. So I will defer you to the book again. I know you're studying it. And hopefully it will become clearer in time. Trevor-Ji, you had something to say about it, beloved?
I want to know what makes one being more adhikar.
Again, in the book of Sadhana, I have talked much about that. Fundamentally, you see, beloved, the degree to which you are able to respond to the grace that is always and already the case, depending to what degree your mind is still not cleansed of its ignorance. The person who is fundamentally in a deep state of ignorance cannot, by definition, respond in any kind of profound way to the descent of grace. They're too ignorant. You follow me? So it is this degree of ignorance that has covered one's mind, that instrument in consciousness through which we know. You can imagine, beloved, like with a pair of glasses, if those glasses are all dirty, then your vision is impacted by that. You can't see things. In the same way, when the mind is still covered by so much ignorance, and when I say ignorance, beloved, I am not talking about academic ignorance. That you can deal with at any decent university. I am talking about the ignorance of your true nature as being divine. That is the ignorance that the mystics aim to help the sadhakas and the spiritual aspirants who come to them remove, to cleanse. And that degree of contamination in mind varies from one aspirant to the other aspirant. Now, there's a little bit more, beloved. Perhaps you can get a copy yourself of the book of Sadhana and begin to read up about it all. There's other things involved in that. There are the concepts of malas. Malas means defilements, covers, layers of ignorance. We talk about the Anava mala, we talk about the Maya mala, we talk about the Kama mala. I even talk about a fourth mala that is unique to black people. I call it the Maha mala. That is the mala that still covers you as a result of the great Holocaust that still keeps you totally ignorant of your physical reality as being African. You don't even understand you're an African. Such is your ignorance. So here at the house, we have to deal with an extra mala. The Maha mala has to first be destroyed, which now paves the way for the destruction of the other malas and layers of ignorance that is obscuring the experience of your own inherent divinity. I tell you, see, Trevor Sahib, it's like this. If in fact you too are a manifestation of that which we're calling God, the question becomes, why aren't you having that experience? You see, it is the question everybody must eventually entertain. Because the mystics and saints say, Navasang, Riyate, Kavasi, there is nothing that exists that is not God anywhere. The African mystic says, Tuba, Jeve, Olumni. If it exists, it is God by definition. Now, why aren't you having the self-experience of that which is divine? That is the question. And you're not having it because of your ignorance of your true nature. You have become identified with a kind of myth, a kind of fantasy, with a mental construct of your sense of self that is totally unrelated to the reality of that which you are. This is what the ego is. It is a false concept of self. So ultimately, in the process of the destruction of the malas, we're really talking about the destruction, then, of the egoic and false sense of self. Some people, you see, beloved, are less embedded in that kind of ego condition than others. Hence, they are able to respond. They are more Adhikar. So when they hear Dhamma, you see, they're able to respond and become transformed. So there's much more that can be said about it. Something else you would like to say? Yes, Trevor Sharp. I'm sorry, beloved, I couldn't hear all of your questions.
Could someone become enlightened after they die? Because after they die,
They drop their bodies? Well, if you read the Bhagwan book, I think I tried to answer that for you. Again, in the book, A Matter of Life and Death, I have talked a great deal about the experience and phenomena that is talked about by mystics after one has dropped the physical body. Let me simply assure you, though, that just as if you drop dead today, you will not become a genius, in the same way, that which you are tends to persist after the dropping of the physical body, because you just dropped the physical body. The mind is still there, and it is the mind that has to be cleansed of its ignorance. So simply by dying, you have not gotten out of the dilemma. You still have that same ignorant mind. You see? And that mind has to be ultimately cleansed of that ignorance. The mind travels with you from incarnation to incarnation to incarnation. And if you are carrying that same mind full of ignorance, then in every incarnation, your outcome will be the same. Nevertheless, beloved, over a vast, incalculable span of time, everybody and everything will recover its recognition of self as God. That's built into the process. It is a rather sophisticated argument. And again, in the book of Sadhana, I have addressed that issue in detail. But since you will have the same mind you have now, beloved, if you cannot recognize your inherent divinity now, then you simply will not be able to recognize it upon the falling away of this physical body, because your mind has not fallen away. And so you're still in the same situation. Something else to say about it? Yes, beloved, and then
talk more about abstinence or the discipline of abstinence as pertains to the mind and activity that goes on a daily basis. It prevents you from really focusing in on the fact that everything is God.
yes, and that is a discipline, that is a practice. And in the retreat, we talked a little bit about that, didn't we? And the tradition, it is said that there should only be two things on your mind: God or death. Anything else, and you're going to lose your balance in the world. Please make a note of it. Either you must always be cognizant of the impermanent nature of everything, that everything that you are doing, everything you are involved in, until and unless you have really stepped back and really looked at the nature of things and have solved things the way things really are, which is impermanent. Nothing is lasting. Everything is coming and going out of being. And until you can operate from that point of view, until you can become established in that point of view, then you will always be tending to become attached to and involved with the world, because you are operating out of ignorance. You're thinking that you can make something permanent out of that which is impermanent. How will you do that? You're trying to find security in a place where there is nothing that is secure. How would you find security in the midst of impermanence? It collapses on its face, you see. So you have to make that kind of profound consideration, then, you see, beloved, in order for the mind to automatically move away from that kind of a thing. Otherwise, your mind and your attention will always be caught up in that because, again, there's a layer of ignorance in you. And your mind is therefore operating under the influence of that ignorance. And that ignorance, that mala, that must be removed. And that requires a profound reflection and a profound consideration and a deep observation and capacity to see things just the way things really are. And once you see that, automatically the senses start coming into control. There's no discipline. The sheer impact of the revelation is such that it automatically disciplines because you see it so clearly. You see it so clearly. But short of that seeing it, beloved, there is no way. There are no mechanical means. There's no book you can read, no ritual you can perform, no ceremony you can undergo that will substitute for this profound understanding. And remember, as we said in the retreat, it has to be real understanding. I have defined ignorance as incomplete knowledge. So when one says that you are ignorant, it doesn't mean you don't know anything. You don't know enough. That's ignorance. Your knowledge is incomplete. So very often you see, beloved, we are operating in the world with incomplete knowledge of the world, i.e. ignorant. You have not really paused and looked at this thing that you call the world. You have not seen it clearly. And so when that is the case, you see, beloved, then you become a victim of the Maya, the illusion, the presumption that you can find security in the midst of insecurity. That's not going to happen. That you can find something that will last forever in a land where nothing lasts forever. You're trying to become fulfilled off of that which is as ephemeral as a bubble that will last no more than 4 days. Yet you must really see it. I cannot emphasize enough that very often we presume to know that which we don't know. As we mentioned in the retreat, I know fire burns, but I still stick my hand in it. It is simply proof positive that you don't know fire burns. You can't. So merely to say, well, Bhagwan, yes, I understand the world is impermanent, but you still find yourself pursuing it as if it is permanent, then that proves that you have not really seen the world the way it is. I have called that delusion. And remember, beloved, in retreat, I said that when one comes to the path, it becomes very easy to become deluded. The path and coming into spirituality and religion and all these things are like a hotbed that will almost always produce delusion and self-deception. And so you will walk around with the illusion that you know something about the world, when in fact you don't know anything about the world in this nature. And your life and living is proof of that. The destiny of such a one who lacks the view, beloved, is suffering, misery. So, again, much, much more can be said about it. So what is one to do, beloved, is to try to get a glimpse of the truth about the true nature of the world and then abide in it, establish yourself in it. In the beginning, you will get it right, then it will fall away. Then again, you will have moments of insight. And then that moment, you will be all right. You will be in the world, but not of it. You see? You will be balanced. You will be in a state of peace. Hotep, as the African mystics called it. You're balanced. Whether your money go up, whether your money go down, whether your relationships are fulfilling or whether they're falling apart, all that is occurring on the peripheral somewhere. You see, it is not touching you. You have found a place that transcends the duality and the dynamics of the world. But then you fall out of that, back into it, and then you have to again. And that is the ordeal that is associated with sadhana, isn't it? To keep practicing until you're able to slowly abide more and more in that condition, that it becomes characteristic of your waking state, and even of the sleeping state, and so forth and so on. But this is what must be done. And few of us ever really make the consideration. I mean, on retreat, you will spend a couple hours up in your room and you'll think about this stuff, but as a rule, my observation has been, the moment you leave retreat, you're right back where you were. You cannot sustain the intensity of reflection. But you simply must do samyama. Samyama means the focusing of your intelligence via your attention onto this proposition about reality to the point of radical understanding. But you must hold it. Your attention and intelligence must not waver. You must hold it right there until you actually can see this. It must be that kind of dogged determination in you. If you don't, you simply will never see it. And not seeing it, then nothing will change. So much more can be said about it. Dayil Sahib, something to say about it, beloved?
The nature of relationships and the opportunity they provide for both on the path, and why or how we might overcome the tendency to repulse and not serve ourselves in our own growth.
Yes. In fact, you see, beloved, that is the whole crux of it. That is the real measurement of one's degree of a spiritual attainment. It should show up in your relationships with other people. Now, here in the house, you see, beloved, we have talked about the 4 pillars of community. These pillars are also inclusive of the relationships, because a community is nothing but a collection of relationships. So we talked about all of that. But even though much has been said about the pillars that must govern a functional community, and I'm simply saying those same pillars must govern a functional relationship, what we have not really understood is that it requires first that you see the other person in a different way. That's the first order of business. Hence, the discipline that we have called Tatsuran. All this is sacred. Everybody and everything is sacred. There's nothing that exists that is not sacred and divine. And until you are able to make that transition, for you, the pillars and all of these things is just informational. You can't apply it. You simply must see that everyone and everything is a manifestation of that which is divine. You must see the divinity. You must become capable, at least mentally, seeing how samadhi is divine. You must see that. Now, when you are able to see the divinity of samadhi in the midst of the relationship, in the midst of the reaction, when she is being very difficult and unpleasant, although that hardly happens with samadhi, so that's a bad example, huh? But she occasionally gets a little unpleasant. These last 17 years or so. What is it, 17, 15? 15 years, Acha. Must have been a moment when samadhi became unpleasant to be around. Absolutely. But in that moment, you see, you have to understand that her divinity is inherent. It is innate. there is nothing she can do to not be divine. One's divinity is absolute. It is a priori. You see, it is outside the scope of your will as a human being. You have nothing to do about it. You cannot undo it. There's nothing you can do that will ever result in the elimination or the destruction of your divinity. You understand me? If it exists, if it is, it's God. So, seeing this divinity, having a glimpse of this divinity, having this understanding and abiding in that understanding, even in those moments when samadhi is difficult, you see, and getting on your last nerve, right? You cannot react to just her personality and ego in that moment, you see, because you're still seeing the divinity behind it, underneath it. And that seeing of her divinity triggers your reverence. You cannot be brutal. Are you following me? In that moment. You simply can't. Simply out of reverence. Your reverence for life, your reverence for others, beloved, is based on the ability to intuit their inherent divinity. Otherwise, there is no way to practice authentic reverence for others. You can practice politics, you can practice being clever, you see, and political, and all those other things, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how to really bring reverence into your relationship with others. And that simply requires of you the ability to always, at all times, to be aware of that individual's inherent divinity. We have called the discipline graya. That is an actual practice you must do. You must cleanse your mind completely of ever coming to the conclusion that anybody or anything is not inherently divine. Because in a moment of conflict, you see, beloved, the first thing you want to do is deprive the other of their humanity and their divinity. Is that about right? And once you have deprived them of their humanity and divinity, then you can do anything you want to them. It is the same principles underlying the Maha. You follow me? So in that moment, you're simply doing what they did in the Maha. You have deprived that person of their divinity. And I'm telling you something very radical. I am saying you simply cannot ever move away from your own inherent divinity. Once you're able to see that, beloved, in that person that you're in relationship with, the next thing now is to see that this is also true about you. You see? That it's also true about you. No matter what you do, in spite of your imperfections, shortcomings, and faults, in spite of all your errors, in spite of all your ugliness, you are still divine. Case closed. Yes, beloved? Yes.
It's in line with your response to Trevor's question, and that is countless lifetimes that we made progress before we start, I guess, a return process, the whole, folks say. That would mean or imply that we bring into every incarnation,
Yes.
before. And it's interesting because our parental relationships, not to mention the society and the culture we're raised in, they bring in a slew of obstacles and actions that may be unveiled and a challenge to our process of awakening.
Oh, yes.
So, in the blessing that may be built into all this that occurred to me is just that the folks that we find in our experience might very well be the catalyst, should stimulate our self-awareness. But I think we must, correct me if I'm wrong, recognize how we react. Be aware all the time of what's reacting to these.
Yes.
Where are you coming from in all interpersonal reactions?
Absolutely,
And
beloved.
seize the challenge.
Sure, see. But it's something that you must actually do. You see, that's the difference. It is something you must actually do. It's not enough to know that you should do that, you must actually do that. And that itself requires that you have already removed a great deal of your own ignorance. Ordinarily, you see, beloved, we are always trying to avoid that person or situation that we don't like. We operate just the opposite. So it requires a rather profound understanding. The ordinary, usual man and woman, beloved, can't do it. That's the first thing to understand. What you're saying is true, but the deeper reality is the ordinary individual can't do that. They don't have the spiritual maturity and ability. They are not Adhikar. You understand? To be governed by that kind of wisdom. So the ordinary individual can't do it. That's what is the path comes in to help the ordinary and usual individual to become Adhikar enough to live at that level. We have religions, and we've had religions since the beginning of time, and every religion have a moral code, an ethical code, and every religion advocate a kind of model of how we should interact with each other, that we should be loving. So it's nothing new. It's no revelation going on here. This is no great aha and no great discovery. It has been known for 10,000 years already. That's not the issue. So it's not that people are lacking the knowledge of this. What people lack is the actual ability to live at that level of love. And so what has to be dealt with now, beloved, how do you move from this kind of ordinary and usual condition where you can know the right but cannot do it? You can know much about being loving, but you can't be loving. You follow me? How do you now make the next level of growth? And that requires sadhana. If not, you simply become self-deluded. You become deluded. You see. And while you think you're being loving, you know what I mean, and all of this, if you check with the other person, they say, oh, hell no, you nothing but an asshole, man. You know, this ain't loving to me. It's loving in your mind, but it ain't loving to me. I'm not having the experience of being loved by you at all. That's a different matter. But you have certainly raised the real issue. Are we able to function in our relationships?
So love is a learning behavior. You know, it's not just, I thought it's just, you know, the case, like happiness is already the case. I always thought love was, but if it was, then you would have the experience of being God.
Yes. See, that's the whole point.
Okay.
If you are not able to recover, or let me put it another way, beloved, to the degree you are able to recover the self-experience of being divine, and to the extent that you're able to see the reality of the divinity of others, well, to that same degree, you are either able or unable to function at the level of love. Everything else is self-delusional. The love of another person is based on your inherent ability to perceive their divinity. That's what fills it with reverence. Otherwise, you are always reacting to them at the level of their ego and personalities. And whenever they are being difficult, in that moment, you cease loving them. You pull back your love. You actually withdraw that whole thing. Whereas real love never withdraws. And it's never conditional. And it's never based upon personality. It is real reverence, because you really see Tatsuram, everything and everyone is sacred. And so am I. And you must be able to turn that corner and see. Otherwise, you simply will never really develop a sense of real intimacy with the other. At all. You will never see the oneness between their divinity and your divinity. That's real intimacy. To be related at our levels of divinity. To be able to move through all of our imperfections, shortcomings, and faults. And no matter how ugly we be with each other, never lose view of the fact that Bharanira is divine. You see? And whenever I'm able to hold that view of you, then I simply cannot be brutal. I cannot. You see? My reverence is triggered by that ability to see that. So this ability to see the inherent divinity in others is critical to relationships, isn't it? Not just to other human beings, but to everything, because it's true of everything. Nothing that exists is not God anywhere, period. Now, you must live on the basis of that understanding. Yes, Satra?
Right, you see, well, since the retreat, I know one of the things in which that I've been observing is that even my thoughts are judgmental. And that even in, practicing, is it Graha? Graha? Or Graya? First Graya. And practicing Graya. I know that, even in observing and trying to disconnect with the emotionality of my thoughts, that even when my thoughts are being forecast in front of me, that there's already a preconceived judgmental factor that's already employed. And just to not pay attention to the judgmental aspect, because again, when there's judgmental, that's a part of anything. You automatically are reality. Because, well, for me, there's already a preconceived ideology about that thing or that person or that object or event. So just to, view your thoughts and eliminate that judgmental aspect, automatically you can, well, for me, I can live in a world without seeing anything and everything as something in which that I have concocted, but seeing it the way in which that it actually is and having the experience of it. Yes. But it's just an amazing thing how judgmental that those thoughts are before they are even paying attention to. There's always some kind of storyline behind.
Always a narrative that you bring to reality and then reinterpret reality of spirit. In fact, you see, beloved, the practice of Tatsuram, or this Graya, is best done in those moments when you are angry at others. That's the best time to do it. When you are in the midst of a conflict with another person, when you are angry at a person, when some conflict is right there. In that moment, in that very instance, if you can have the realization, Tatsuramba, then it will cause you in that moment to cease the aggression and violence and the brutality that you will otherwise certainly release upon that other person. You can stand back from those negative propensities and impulses. So the practice of Tatsurama and Graya is to be done right in the midst of this here. You're looking for those precise moments, and you don't have to wait long, because sooner or later, you're bound to come across somebody or something that's going to piss you off, because you're full of all these false and wrong expectations of how things should be, right? You have this wrong understanding of Shirley, and therefore wrong expectations of Shirley, and Shirley is bound to violate your expectations. So you're going to have your moment where you can practice this, but you must practice right in the midst of that, just at that moment, right in the heat of the battle. When you're about to cuss them out, if you can just hold that cuss word just a minute and remember, simran it, remember Tatsuram, it'll break that spell. It'll break it. Just that moment. But as you see, if you're sitting around in your armchair philosophizing about it at night, that's not the real practice. That's philosophizing. That stuff is meaningless. It has no value. It doesn't transform. It brings about no changes in you. It doesn't enter into the relationship. Right in the midst of your anger, right in the midst of the conflict, just when you are ready to declare them inhuman and non-divine, and therefore, bam, just in that moment, if you can remember, Tasuram, if you can see Tasuram, it breaks it. Now, there will be moments when you are confronted where you won't see it because it depends on where you are at, individually, personally. Some people will only have that breakthrough once every 2 years. Well, that's all right. You know what I mean? That's where you're at. So that's where you have to begin your practice, from where you are at. But you must start that practicing. And then slowly over time, you see, as you become more and more practiced at it, as you are able to reestablish yourself in wisdom, then slowly those moments become fewer and fewer and fewer. And what you begin to experience for the first time in your life is peace, right in the midst of the conflict. Now, you will still respond appropriately. Do not misunderstand me. You see? But you will be responding within the context of an awareness of that person's divinity. It liberates you. It is a kind of emotional yoga. And this is the kind of emotional asana and posture that you must be able to hold. Just like in meditation, beloved, we have to train the body to hold the physical posture, and how long that takes depends on the condition of each person's body, right? It can take you 6 months, 6 years to teach your body how to become still and motionless for 2 or 3 hours. It depends. The same is with training the emotional self, body. How long it takes you depends upon the condition of your own equipment. But certainly it is valid, no matter if it is something that is only happening every blue moon. Try to catch it in that moment. Tasuram. You see? And you recover your balance and your sanity and your reverence. In fact, all of the things that people be saying about you, they can't even hurt as much anymore. You know, it is a profound matter. It is a profound matter. Now, I've asked Bilal and Sadhaki-Ji and Gurumurti to help Bilal provide you all with a study group for this book of sadhana, because that argument is so profound. You're going to have to visit it, you see, many times to really get it. But all of those practices that we began at the retreat, if you just keep doing that, much knowledge will come to you. And once you are able to acknowledge and always be aware of their divinity, just like I'm always aware that Joyce is a woman. Even when we fight, I understand you're a woman. Well, you follow me? I never lose sight of the reality she's a female. In that same way, you must never lose reality of the sight that they're divine. Are you following me? Until that realization becomes that stable, then you see you must keep practicing. But you simply never forget that. And then you're ready to move to the next level. Yes, beloved. I'm sorry, beloved, I can't hear you.
You say see the divinity in a person. When I first started to do that practice in the heat of anger or disagreement,
hard to see divinity?
But what it was like a different presence of something that I felt about him that I couldn't really visualize, but it did, the anger and stuff, it went away, you know, it did go away, but it was something, I was just looking and I'm like, okay, I can't see it, you know, per se with these eyes, but it was something that I felt, that I recognized.
Yeah. It's almost the divinity of a person, you see, beloved, is something that's so utterly profound. I'm not particularly talking about a characteristic. He got a divine nose. He ain't got no divine nose. You know, that's a physical body nose. Nothing particularly divine about it. But Radhavira is the understanding that he is not that body in the first place. You know, it's seeing beyond body and personality and all that stuff. You're not trying to justify your assignment of divinity to him on the basis of anything like that, because that's all going to change. You know what I mean? What happens when he gets the ugly nose? Now you're going to deprive him of his humanity? No. It is a kind of profound understanding that is at a much deeper level. It is something that you have to understand ontologically. That if it exists, it is God, period. There is nothing else to add to it. The fact is, beloved, if he exists, by definition, he is God. Whether he has any godly looks and quality is after the fact. You see, that's epiphenomena. You know, that's neither here nor there. It's the existing part you have to get. Tubajebe olunhu ne. If it exists, it is God. Nasavam vyate kavasi. There is nothing that exists that is not God anywhere. So by definition, he is divine. He is a manifestation of divine, because what else could he be? So you have to go through the whole argument. You have to really seriously consider this mystery. You really have to understand how all of this has come about. You have to start that long process of asking these kind of profound questions. From where have all this come? What is the source of all of this? So forth and so on, you see? And if your conclusion is that there's a God, and that God is the source of everything, and everything is, in fact, God, and so forth and so on, then, you see, you have not even put any conditions on him being divine. You don't have to see him or contort him a certain way. You follow me? It simply is the case. And then on the basis of that, you see, that's the line you never cross. You never cross that line. And you're going to fight, you're going to argue, you're going to do all of those things, you know, because after all, you have not recovered your own recognition of divinity. But you at least got a new mental concept. But please bear in mind, the mental concept of a person's inherent divinity is not the full realization of the person's divinity. Are you with me? It's a mental construct. It's good because prior to that, you are working off a wrong mental concept of who he is, right? What we have called the Ashuddha-viya. You had a wrong mental concept. Now we're replacing it with the Surya-vikalpa, a right mental concept. That is divine. But it's still mental, right? It paves the way for the deeper experience of his divinity, you see. But you must at least get the right mental view of it. And he is divine simply because he is, period. You know? And you don't have to do anything to make it so. You're trying to do something to help make him divine. Is that about right? And that's going to be hard to do with this rascal, right? So, you know, just simply understand that. It comes with more and more as you get used to it. This practice, this radical practice of Tatsudaram, trying to really reconstruct your mental concept of others. To move it from that ideology that Sartre pointed out, all that judgment and all that stuff, to cleanse your mind of all of that so that you are able to begin to have a clear and right mental concept. Paves the way now. So that's where you have to begin. And that must be practiced. And I have suggested, as I've said already, that you practice it right in those moments when you are confronted. Right when you're feeling yourself about to deprive a person of their humanity and divinity. That's when you practice it. Right there in that moment. Does that help some, beloved?
Yeah, just a question tack on what you were just saying. Is that behavior contagious within a community? When it's practiced within a community, does it become contagious?
Oh, yes. In fact, that was the whole argument behind our 4 pillars, you see. With those 4 pillars, that is the argument that I'm making. And in the Sankofa Dharma, we even, because Kunsa and them, they gathered the information where we have even a better presentation of that argument. So if you go through those pillars again very carefully, so you can't do Bhakti Yoga without first having made that transition into seeing, assuming, presuming the divinity of others. That presumption must be there in order to do Bhakti Yoga. It must be there to enter into conscious relationships. It must be there for Karma Yoga and Seva. It must be there for everything. Otherwise, you can't practice the pillars. You see? And the community will not become a great community at all. You see? But once you start practicing it, once you got Tatsudaram down, once you got that down, and you start first in your intimate relationships at home, you see, with your wife, with your children, because those are good opportunities for you, because they're natural. They're not contrived, you know. You see, you don't have to do anything. It's going to happen automatically by virtue of the intimacy and the closeness in the relationships. Some instant is bound to come up, right, where you're going to lose your view. And in that moment, you have to start training yourself to catch it. And then, beloved, once that is perfected, it expands out. Because the statement is, everything and everyone. That includes your neighbor. It includes everything and everyone. If you could find the most horrible, what you do, find that person you hate the most. Now slot them up in your mind. Must be somebody there, right? Persons or kinds of people that you just hate, that really causes you a strong repulsive response in you. And then practice trying to see past that and try to disprove it. Are they not God? You see, at this level, you're deepening the revelation. There's a process, and I've outlined it in the book of Sadhana. I've talked about how you have to start first with the Graya, then Grahaka, then Samvit, then Samavesa, then there's Akespa and Tagya and so forth and so on. It's at this 5th and 6th stage of practice where you're locking in, because now you're reversing it. You're trying to see, is there an exception? Is there anything that exists that is not God? Now you're looking for that. I mean, you're really getting into it seriously now. Is there anything anywhere that is not God? Because you're trying to see that. You're trying to lock that down now. You're not doing philosophy no more. You follow me? You've ceased doing philosophy. And you simply must get beyond the realm of philosophy to really get this thing. You see, you must get beyond the realm of psychology, because this is beyond psychology and it's beyond philosophy now. You see, philosophy and psychology is good. You know, it can pave the way, so to speak, but it cannot take you all the way. We have to leave it behind. Now, you really got to look at that. Is there anything that exists anywhere that is not God? Is there anyone, anywhere that exists that is not a modification and manifestation of God? Now, try to see that. Try to see that. And that begins to establish you even deeper in it. Because when we say nothing that exists anywhere is not God. We're also talking about time, aren't we? And space together. So that means there is simply no time when Mukherjee is not divine. That is not like she's divine on Monday and Wednesday. You understand? Between the hours of 4 and 6. No. Her divinity is always, already the case, every minute and moment that she is. She is a manifestation of the divine. That's getting deep now. You see? See, it's very easy to see their divinity when everything is pleasant and hunky-dory. You know what I mean? No arguments, the dinner was good, the sex was great, blah, 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 blah. But it's when they're in like a raving lunatic, that's when it's hard. So yes, beloved, as you practice these things, yes, they do spill out into the community. They do spill out into other people. You see? And for the first time, you're able to fulfill your goal of Paraspara Devo Bhava, which is the goal of those 4 pillars, isn't it? Is to generate for others the experience of them being divine. Is that about right? That's what we talk about when we talk about building a spiritually functional community and so forth and so on. We're talking about giving each other the experience of being divine. Paraspara Devo Bhava, right? And you can't do that unless you are first able to become established in the moment-to-moment seeing of that person's inherent divinity in spite of their imperfections, shortcomings, and fault. You see? And to see your own inherent divinity in spite of your own imperfections, shortcomings, and fault. Beloved, I'm telling you, I don't care what your imperfections, shortcomings, and faults are. I don't care what you've done or what you haven't done. Your divinity is simply inherent and unconditional, and you can't be anything other than a manifestation of that divine being, period. And on that basis, I develop divine respect for you as opposed to conventional respect for you. When I'm able to see that in myself, then I develop divine self-respect as opposed to conventional self-respect. And conventional self-respect for myself and others is not going to cut it. You see, we're going for divine self-respect. I mean, it's quite a profound matter, beloved, if one can recover, even mentally recover, even in your imagination to recover the possibility of your divinity being the case and experiencing it. Now, all of that anger at yourself dissolves. All of that guilt dissolves. All that shame dissolves. There's a kind of liberation in that, isn't it? You see? Yes, beloved.
Is that even the thinking of it in an imaginary way takes work and practice in doing sadhana, because the frame of reference, the paradigm you're working from for years and years is just the opposite of what you're saying. And it really takes a lot of practice and focus to get there.
It should take great discipline. When you wake up in the morning, you have to
Get started out.
to the room. Now brush your teeth, watch up. You understand? Get in your space. You know, because then you'll fall out. But then you got to get back in, and you'll fall out again, and then you got to get back in, and you'll fall out again. And like that, you'll go back and forth until slowly you'll have more and more moments and longer moments of abiding in that and being established in that condition, you see? And then your experience becomes very different. Even in the world, your experience becomes very different. You see, your relationships with others become very different.
Is so obtuse, I mean, difficult to even imagine, because this word divinity has always been so off in a distance, not me necessarily, not those around me. Then to look for that in myself and others it becomes more, the more you practice it, it becomes more a reality.
Yes.
And it's like things become more and more revealed to you.
Yes.
The more you put the effort into trying to see
Right,
it.
right. The more energy, time, and attention you put into this cleansing process, then the more you remove that ignorance and alter the whole quality of your experience. You see?
But I'm still working on the part about when I'm angry. You know, that's the real test.
Yeah. But that's the best time to practice. Right in that moment when you are angry at a person. Because when you're angry at a person, no, you have every tendency in you to deprive them of their humanity. You are going to deprive them of anything being good about them. Hell, ain't nothing good about them. I'm mad at them. Shit. In that moment, I have experienced all of our good qualities. You know what I mean? I've thrown them out the window, right? And in that moment of anger, you're ready to brutalize, to attack, to
That's
hurt.
why when you're angry, you are in the state of egoity. And to be able to see divinity when you're so entrenched in your egoity that the anger is coming out. I know the anger is there for a purpose, is to protect us own self.
Yes, I understand.
But still, it's to see that.
It's hard. But you see, beloved, developing this is just like developing courage. I've seen on many occasions that you don't develop courage to go through your fear. You go through your fear, and courage is a byproduct. In the same way, there's nothing that you can practice before that that'll really serve in that situation. Remember, I pointed out at the retreat that that's the distinction between real knowledge and pseudo-knowledge. Pseudo-knowledge can't function in a situation. You follow me? Whenever the situation arises, pseudo-knowledge fails. You have to practice right in the midst of this thing. But I used to always say the best and only place to conquer a fear of your tigers is in the jungle. Can't do it sitting at home. You got to get right out here, right in the midst of your anger, right in the midst of your greed, right in the midst of your love. You got to get right in that thing. And that's where you practice. That's where you do sadhana. Sadhana at the crossroads is what I'm talking about. Hmm? That's right. Well, in your drama. I mean, into your drama, right? Don't get in their drama, but in your drama, get into that. And in that moment, catch it. Do tatsu. Because if you can't practice there, you can't practice. You may think tatsuram, everything is nice and pleasant, and then the moment somebody make you mad, God damn it! You know what I mean? What happened to your tatsurama? You don't have no tatsuram practice. The only proof that you have developed the ability to practice tatsuram is in the midst. Right there in the midst. That's where you practice it. It's like learning to meditate, right? Where else can you learn to meditate but sitting here? Right? Lay back up in your bed, cock back, reading a book on asanas and postures and breathing and all of that. That is has nothing to do with it, does it? You can't learn it from a book, can you? You have to get right down in the crossroads, don't you? That's where you learn. Similarly, beloved, in those moments, and you have them all the time, all right? So there's not going to be any shortage of practice here, right? There's always something that's going to happen. You don't like somebody that you don't like, somebody rub you the wrong way, piss you off, blah, 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 right? So there's plenty of, that's right.
When I started revisiting why it started, then we know it's okay, but
Yes.
it was hard.
I want to give you a heart attack.
My lips was bleeding. I had to shut up.
But that doesn't mean, beloved, that you got a lot of ignorance that has. You see, you got a lot of ignorance, you know, so you just got to work hard. You should get 2 husbands.
So would you say, when you see the divinity in people, would your conflicts cease to be there once you can see how divine, like you see the divinity in people, like I said? Once you see that in people, will you cease having conflicts with them?
Yeah, your experience will be different. Now, conflict is inherent. I mean, that's built into the War from Wolf, part of life. But what happens, beloved, is that it doesn't impact you like it used to. You know, like when you enter into conflict with people, you have disagreements, and you're going through that whole ordeal, your heart is palpitating, your lips is bleeding, blah, 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 right? Because she's all involved in it. Do you see my point? You see? No. So it's there, but Maharaj used to use the example, it's like it reduces what would otherwise been the pain of being cut by a sword to a pinprick. Everything becomes pinprick now. You know, there's still a little, but it's a pinprick. Nothing. You can handle that. And you don't lose your peace. And you don't lose reverence. You see, you don't lose reverence. You no longer try to base that person's worth and value and humanity and all of that on how they're behaving. You know, it has nothing to do with how they're behaving. I mean, so there's a line you don't cross, you see, in that moment of conflict, that otherwise you would cross, right? And you would say or do something that really invalidates that person's worth as an individual and as a human being, and certainly as being divine. Here you're holding that line. There's a line you don't cross, you see? And in spite of all of this, it doesn't take back the fact that they are divine, because there's nothing but God. I mean, here's just God cussing me out, but it's still God. You know what I mean? I mean, you start moving at a different level. It is really a profound matter. Again, hopefully in this study group, Rick Sahib, you come, do you have the book? You don't have the book? All right, somebody make sure he gets the book. You make sure your son gets the book. Come to the study group, because it'll give you a great deal of skills when you really are able to practice this. You see? But it must be practiced. Yes, beloved? And
I was thinking about that in the fact of being in conflict and depending on what your so-called profession may be, because I remember the Legacy of Love was a Maharaj that was an attorney or something, so he had this big dilemma. Because I think maybe just attorneys and politicians maybe, I'm being like, just thinking about this, but that whole nature of what they have to do and be in conflict with somebody and rewarded based on how good you can enter that conflict must be...
it's a challenge. You can easily lose your balance. That's why it's so important to practice, you see. Because you will go through all these things. Life will still have conflict. You will still have run-ins and all of that. That's not going to change. But what changes is something in you. What changes is that you're able to maintain your peace of mind. Yes. You're able to reduce the pains of the world to pinpricks. And that's where it's at. You know what I mean? That's where it's at. You have taken your peace of mind to a whole nother level. Before, you see how fragile your peace of mind is? You know, now you're feeling pretty good, now you go home and there it is, you see? And now your whole day is ruined. All this beautiful day you enjoy playing the drum. That girl at home, man, can take all of this from you, huh? You're vulnerable. You follow me? You see? And this Tatsudaram eventually makes you invulnerable to that. Can't nobody take your peace no more.
Reacting to situations that you learn to respond appropriately.
You respond appropriately and you transcend. Once you have established yourself in the view, beloved, once you have really practiced this thing of Tatsudaram, of seeing this divinity in other people, and then seeing it in yourself, you have to do both eventually. You must do the first part, and then you must do your part. And then it's only after you have also done your part of it that you come to this level now that I'm talking about. You see? So you must do the graha, you must do the grahaka, you see, to get to this thing that I'm talking about. Because you must also practice seeing your own inherent divinity. Aren't you divine? And you must become more and more capable of having the self-experience of your own divinity. No fooling, no kidding. I mean, you must really try to experience and feel your divinity. Well, you start there. You see, all this is just altering mental concepts.
So in a mental way, you can think of others as being divided. But sometimes it's easier for me to
It is easier.
than to think of myself as
That's right. That's why I said do that one first, because it is easier. You see? All right. If you all will indulge me a moment, I have some family business to handle. So if someone would bring me a couple of empty chairs here. All right. Speaking of family, Dayosar was talking about community, but community is nothing but collections of family. And everything starts with family. And family is a relationship that is not simply limited to bloodlines. I mean, ordinarily we define our family by having common parents and so forth and so on. But that's family, it is conventional, an ordinary level. There is another level of being family that transcends the biological level of being family. That is when your family become related to you, not merely at the level of genetics and blood, but at the level of understanding. You're related at the level of understanding. That becomes a much greater event. And as you become related from the biological to the level of understanding, it paves the way for you to become related at the level of consciousness. And then your family is defined by those in whom the same consciousness is running. In the tradition, we have called that kula. Kula. A group of people who have the same consciousness, the same enlightenment. And so it has seemed to be my destiny and good fortune in this lifetime to have been born in and given birth to such a family that can transcend the limitation of their biology and move then into a deeper level of relationship. And so it continues today. So, Tina, you bring my grandson, and Emmy, where's Chartsy? Come, Chartsy. My other grandson, so that they may move to the next level in my family. In ancient times, you see, when a child would come into the family, the first thing that you would give them is the gift of the signs of life. And what the ancestors would do was to mark them with the Ankh, which is the sign of life, and give them that along with the gift of divine protection. And so sometimes these ceremonies take on a little bit more significant when we understand what's going on behind them. Now, when Charles was born, one of the things I noticed most about him was that he had an extraordinary memory. He remembered things. And I was very happy to see that, because that meant that there was someone here that I could give the way to, who will remember it and take it down even further. And so his name that I give to him today reflects that ability that he was born with. And now he becomes not only my biological son, my spiritual son. And I shall call him Sankofa-Ji, Afrika. And today, I give him the signs and marks of life. If I can open it. I give you Sankofa-Ji. And then, if that was not enough good fortune, again, another ancestor came. Also different. Born seeing. Strange. Because most children, they tell us, do not really see things clearly until months. But this boy came seeing instead of crying. And he looked unblinkingly. At first, we thought, this is a quirk. Maybe something wrong. But he could see. He was born full of attention. He was born with his attention operating. Clear. Seeing and paying attention. And I thought, good, because we will need someone that can pay attention. All that is required is to give him the right thing to pay attention to. And so today, I make that gift of the right thing to pay attention to, so that his siddhi and natural skill is not squandered in this lifetime. See, he's paying attention. And this one I call Maha Surat-Ji, Afrika, capable of great attention. All right. Born son of David. Now, heart-born son of God, Maha Sarati. Worship. Just a little bit more patience. I have a little bit more work to do. St. Mark, Sah, come. This St. Mark. Yes. But you're here, you come, beloved. You come. I was going to do one at a time, but that's okay. Someone drape him. When Detroit Mark, that's what they used to call him, came across this Dhamma, he became restless and have remained restless ever since that day. It triggered something in him. That he had not felt before, although he had read much spiritual literature. And he sensed an opportunity now to fulfill the longings of a lifetime. And he came crashing down from Detroit on the house in search of that which he has sought all his life. You all know he drives from Detroit down here. It's a long way to drive. You don't drive from Detroit to play. It being a seeker. He wants to be a disciple. He has wanted to be a disciple since the time he was a little boy. Like other kids dreamed about growing up and being firemen and policemen and lawyers and doctors. This man grew up, wanted to be a disciple so that he can become a man of wisdom. And so we will acknowledge that desire in you so that you will always be forceful about it. And we will call you Sadhaki-Ji, Afrika. The Sadhaka is one who seeks to do sadhana, one who will do sadhana. So this name will remind you then, beloved, that you simply must do sadhana. Your name is what you do. You're a Sadhaka. And don't you ever forget it. Now, you know, I've been around here a while, and I've had an opportunity to meet so many people. So many people have come in search of, looking for the same thing you all have come in search of, looking for. I've had many private conversations with many people, and they present their case for initiation. They present me with their rationale and motive for wanting to be on the path. Some have brought beautiful and very long discussion to me about why they want to be on the path. Very eloquent words. Some even brought their resumes with them to justify my considering them for initiation. But no one came like him. Sitting outside at this very place he came, not with words, not with clever argument, not saying things to impress me with his background and so forth and so on. The man came with tears in his eyes, voice choked so no words could be spoken. He said he's ready to go home. He had enough of this misunderstanding that you call life, that you can't get enough of. All of his life, nobody's understood him. And his heart could not take another breaking, nor could he break another heart. He was ready to come home. He convicted me with his tears, not his arguments. He was the only one that cried for initiation. He is fit for initiation. He is simply fit for the grace of God. Therefore, I call you from this day henceforth, beloved, Adhikar-Ji, Afrika, one who is fit for the grace of the Guru. With that said, beloved, we will prepare for side. You can.
Everybody been through that?